Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander, Episode 98, The Treaty of Apamea. Last time we watched Anatolia crumble before the Romans. Antiochus III had been trounced at Magnesia, and now there was nothing left to stop Rome. The king had agreed to send delegates to get peace terms approved by the Senate. Let's see how our envoys get on, and what exactly the outcome of this deputation was. We pick up again with Livy's narrative once the various delegations begin feeding into the Roman Senate. The Aetolian delegates decided that the best defense was a good offense, reminding Rome of their work fighting against Philip V alongside the Romans. All the while, they were not doing what they were supposed to do, which was grovel. The Aetolian delegates outraged the Senate with how accusing their tone sounded while defending themselves. However, they wilted under questioning. One senator, whom Livy does not name, asked the delegates if the Aetolian League would put the question of what to do with them to the Roman people. Another asked if they would have the same diplomatic friends and foes from now on as the Roman Republic would. To this, the Aetolians had no answer, so they were ejected from the Senate House. Once they'd gone, the Senate erupted into cries that the Aetolians were still full Seleucid allies. They still had hope that Antiochus III could pull through, hence their behaviour, the Senate said. In fact, the Roman Senate had in mind that the war should go on until the Aetolians were broken. Right now, they said, as their delegates were trying to get a peace deal, the Aetolians were also attacking the cities of Dolopeia and Apamea. So, at the suggestion of a senator called Marcus Acilius, the Senate decreed that the Aetolian delegates should have 15 days to leave Italy, being evicted from Rome the same day as the decree. A man called Varro was sent with them to ensure that they were safe. However, the message went with them that any Aetolian who came afterward would be seen as a hostile actor, unless they were sent with particular permissions and with a Roman accompanying them. So, that's the Aetolians down. Not the biggest success story, I'm sure you'll agree. However, we then get the Seleucid delegation showing up with a subordinate of Consul Scipio by the name of Marcus Aurelius Cotta. They came along with Eumenes II and delegates from Rhodes. Cotta told the Roman people what had happened in Asia, and 3-day celebrations promptly erupted at the news of the victory at Magnesia. Eumenes II of Pergamon was admitted to speak in the Senate. He thanked Rome for rescuing him and his brother Attalus from being besieged, and then praised the Romans for their victories. He was then asked what he thought the terms should be. This kicked off a back and forth of fake modesty, to almost a farcical degree, where Eumenes tried to yield the floor and the Senate kept pushing him forwards. The king even tried to leave the Senate House, but was collected by a praetor to speak. Eventually, though, he spoke, aware as he was that the Rhodians would speak up next. Rhodes would want the Greek cities in Anatolia to be given their freedom, which Eumenes II disapproved of. It wouldn't just be the Seleucid cities that would be made free if this sweeping measure passed, but no doubt also the vassal cities of Pergamon. This would, Eumenes told the Senate, be a backdoor way of getting at him, and he warned the Senate not to be unfair to her allies. He then recounted that he had received his alliance with Rome from his father, who had been a loyal friend to the Romans. In fact, he had died while exhorting the people of Boeotia to ally themselves to the Romans. Antiochus III, said Eumenes, had tried to offer him a daughter to marry in order to get Eumenes on his side. However, Eumenes had refused and had supported the Romans. He then got to the question of terms. Antiochus III should be evicted from all lands west of the Taurus mountains. Eumenes said, presumably putting his halo over his head, that he would happily let Rome take over the conquered lands, but if they were planning to pull out of Anatolia altogether, he deemed himself the worthiest man to occupy the lands they had wrenched from the Seleucids. He brushed off the question that he must have thought was coming about whether it would not be more noble just to simply let those lands be free. He agreed in principle, but in practice only if those same lands had not also been fighting against Rome, which these lands had been. This speech went down well with the Senate. After a brief pause to consider other delegates, because one of the Rhodians wasn't there yet, so there was an intermission of sorts while he got there, the Rhodian envoys spoke up. They, perhaps unsurprisingly, disagreed with Eumenes, saying that any one region from the Anatolian territories would make Eumenes powerful if it were given to him. However, giving him all of Seleucid Anatolia would make him unstoppable. They reminded Rome of its past virtues regarding conquered spoils. They argued that the Romans could not just consider Greece itself as Greek. The cities elsewhere in the Mediterranean were just as Greek, and so, I assume, just as deserving of the idea of Greek liberty which the Romans were supposedly defending. Interestingly, the Rhodian delegation cited the example of Massilia, a city which was supposedly surrounded by barbarians but was apparently in Rome's esteem. This Massilia is the future city of Marseille, which was founded about 400 years earlier. Rhodes argued that, rather than giving the newly conquered territory to Eumenes, Rome should simply annex it. Perhaps understandably, the Roman Senate liked the idea. Finally, the Seleucids were invited to take the floor. They begged the Senate for clemency, as Antiochus III had already faced ample punishment. They simply requested the peace terms Scipio Africanus had set out be honoured. We discussed these terms last time in episode 97, and will do so again more comprehensively in episode 99 as part of our overview of what the picture looks like now. However, we have enough to be getting on with in this episode. Besides, the peace term Bevan highlights as the more relevant one has already shone through over the course of this episode. Any land west of the Taurus was to be given up by the Seleucids. The Senate voted that Africanus' terms go into effect, and a couple of days after, the Roman people ratified this ratification. The peace was brought into force with Antipater, the king's paternal nephew, acting as the Seleucid representative. So, in the end, Eumenes II would gain almost all Seleucid territories west of the Taurus mountains. However, the territories of Lycia and Caria would go to Rhodes. Moreover, any cities which had been vassals of Antiochus III should be free, not given over to Pergamon. Still, any cities in Anatolia which had once paid tribute to Taurus I should now be vassals of Eumenes II. A Roman commission of 10 men was sent to Anatolia in order to work out the fine details, in contrast to the Senate's rather broad brushstrokes vision. The commission transferred Lycaonia, the Phrygian region, and Mysia from Prusias Bithynia back to Pergamon. These were all regions which had previously been seized by Prusias, so the motivation is sort of understandable. There were some exceptions to the broad general picture, including Magnesia on Sipylus, which was made free. Moreover, the region that Ptolemy of Telmessus had once governed was also not given to the Rhodians. I mainly mention this example because of the throwback to earlier generations of the Ptolemaic dynasty which we discussed way back in episode 27. It's amazing how these things come around again. There was one final question to sort out. The Rhodians wanted to discuss Soli, a Greek city founded by colonists from Argos just as Rhodes had been. The Rhodians wanted Soli to be free from Seleucid dominance because of this bond. However, when Antipater was summoned back into the Senate, the king's nephew objected, as he argued that Rhodes did not want Soli to be free, but Cilicia itself. This territory lies east of the Taurus Mountains rather than west, and so this would be against the terms of the treaty. The Senate noted his determined opposition and initially wanted to fight the matter, but the Rhodians yielded in favour of letting the peace go through. So, there you have it. The Treaty of Apamea has been signed and ratified. As of the summer of 188 BCE, Antiochus III has abandoned all territories west of the Taurus. He has also given his fleet away and agreed to pay the 15,000 talents. Antiochus III has, now if not before, been humbled. That said, he's still with us for a little while. However, this will only translate into one episode. Episode 99 next time will take us up to 187 BCE, when we finally say goodbye to our king of several decades. After that, all that will be left to do is to review his life and award him his epithet. However, that brings us to the end of today's episode. As always, thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch at the show's email address. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.